Mexico is striking back. Faced with U.S. tariffs, Mexico launches bold retaliation that could shake North America's trade landscape and ripple across the globe. What's at stake as tensions soar? Mexico's bold challenge. Against the U.S., a relentless trade retaliation and its global implications. For years, Mexico has stood as a vital manufacturing hub in North America, deeply integrated into the U.S. supply chain, especially in sectors like automotive and electronics. But today, that interdependence is being tested like never before. As the Trump administration enforces aggressive tariffs to revive American manufacturing, Mexico is no longer standing by. On March 29, 2025, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum sent a clear and forceful message. Mexico will not accept unilateral trade pressure. She declared that her government is ready to deploy every economic tool available to defend its export-driven economy and safeguard domestic jobs. This time, however, Mexico is going beyond the auto industry. The retaliation now targets strategic sectors, including electric vehicles, agriculture, energy, and base metals, signaling a broader, more calculated response. This escalation comes on the heels of Canada's announcement of a 25% tariff on U.S. automobiles, placing the United States in a trade squeeze from both its neighbors. But this is more than a trade spat. Mexico's move reflects a larger shift, a growing determination among U.S. neighbors to assert their economic autonomy and resist American protectionism. By targeting future-defining sectors like EVs and clean energy, Mexico isn't just reacting. It's repositioning itself as a global player with leverage. As the U.S. finds itself isolated, caught between Canadian and Mexican resistance, pressure mounts. Is America first leading the U.S. into strategic isolation? Or will Washington adjust course in the face of rising regional pushback? Either way, one thing is clear. Mexico is no longer playing defense. It's rewriting the rules of engagement. The mounting weight of the U.S.-Mexico tariff showdown. The trade conflict between the United States and Mexico has entered a dangerously tense phase, with escalating developments threatening to push the situation beyond control. Former President Donald Trump's abrupt imposition of a 25% tariff on all cars and light trucks not manufactured within the U.S. has sent shockwaves through bilateral relations, propelling both countries into their most intense standoff since the signing of the USMCA, responding swiftly yet strategically. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum announced that her administration is finalizing a strong retaliatory package, slated for release on April 3rd. However, while bracing for a potential economic clash, Sheinbaum has been careful to leave the door to dialogue with Washington ajar. This signals that Mexico is not deliberately seeking confrontation, but still prioritizes negotiation as the preferred route to avoid unnecessary harm to both economies. At the center of this standoff lies the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, which remains a foundational framework for regional economic stability. Although Trump's tariff decree tests the limits of this pact, the agreement offers built-in flexibility that could help soften the blow. One such mechanism, is the ability for importers to certify the U.S. content of goods, which could lower the applicable tariffs. This serves as a crucial safety net for businesses scrambling to navigate a rapidly shifting trade landscape. Faced with both significant risk and potential leverage, Mexico is now advancing a dual-track strategy, one grounded in diplomacy, the other in calculated readiness for retaliation. Mexico's Economy Minister, Marcelo Ebrard, currently coordinating from Washington, confirmed that his team has engaged in several rounds of high-level talks with U.S. trade officials. The aim is to secure exemptions for Mexican exports and prevent a full-scale trade war that could wreak havoc on industries across both nations. At the same time, Mexican authorities are under no illusion that diplomacy alone will suffice. The government is preparing a tiered system of retaliatory tariffs, 10%, 20%, and possibly even 25%, that mirror the U.S. imposed rates. If enacted, these countermeasures could generate ripple effects far beyond North America. Given Mexico's critical role as a manufacturing hub within global supply chains, economists estimate that Mexico's retaliatory tariffs could inflict as much as $150 billion in economic damage on the United States. Among the sectors most vulnerable is the electric vehicle (EV) industry, one of the fastest growing and most strategically significant in this decade. Due to the deeply interconnected nature of EV supply chains, any new tariff barriers could stifle production, stall innovation, and drive up consumer prices. This triple blow would strike at the heart of competitiveness, technological progress, and affordability alike. Economic interdependence, teetering on the brink. By 2024, the volume of trade between the United States and Mexico had reached an astonishing $800 billion annually, a testament to the extraordinary degree of economic interdependence binding the two nations. This robust partnership is anchored in several critical sectors, including automotive manufacturing, electronics, industrial machinery, energy, and agriculture. Among these, Mexico's rise as a key supplier of electric vehicle components and lithium-ion batteries has been particularly striking, with exports in that domain soaring by over 40% in just 5 years. However, this deeply integrated system now faces a serious threat. Washington's latest protectionist maneuver, a sweeping 25% tariff on Mexican imports, risks upending the fragile equilibrium that supports cross-border commerce. For industrial hubs like Texas and California, where integrated supply chains with Mexico are essential to maintaining global competitiveness, the consequences could be immediate and severe. Industries that depend on precision engineering, lean logistics, and low production costs, such as EV assembly, green energy systems, and advanced tech manufacturing, are bracing for significant operational disruption. The likely outcomes: rising input costs, logistical slowdowns, and potentially large-scale job losses. While some U.S. policymakers portray Mexico's retaliatory measures as unnecessarily combative, officials in Mexico City push back firmly against this characterization. In their view, the countermeasures are not acts of hostility, but of necessity. a strategic recalibration meant to address what they see as a growing imbalance in bilateral trade, exacerbated by Washington's increasingly insular economic posture. For Mexico, defending its national economic interests is not a provocation. It's a matter of sovereignty. One of the most vulnerable flashpoints in this unfolding dispute is agriculture. Should Mexico target key U.S. exports such as tomatoes, avocados, chili peppers, or fruit juices, the effects on American consumers would be both swift and far-reaching. Agricultural hubs like California, Florida, and Texas, all heavily reliant on low-cost Mexican produce, could see dramatic price spikes that ripple throughout grocery chains and food services alike. Yet agriculture represents only one dimension of the looming disruption. Other vital sectors, such as construction materials, consumer electronics, and energy, all of which rely heavily on stable and affordable Mexican imports, are equally exposed. This accelerating trade standoff serves as a sobering illustration of how precarious North America's economic interconnectivity truly is. What began as a unilateral U.S. initiative to shield domestic industry is quickly morphing into a full-fledged regional economic confrontation. Mexico, for its part, appears resolute. It is willing to absorb short-term pain if that is what it takes to restore long-term balance and preserve its economic independence. Strategic diversification and Mexico's long game. Amid mounting trade tensions with the United States, Mexico is signaling a bold and deliberate shift in its economic direction. Though nearly 80% of Mexican exports still head north to the U.S., President Claudia Sheinbaum's administration is making it clear that it won't allow economic dependency to dictate national policy. Rather than reacting passively to Washington's pressure, Mexico is proactively laying the groundwork for a long-term strategic realignment, one designed to reduce its vulnerability to the unpredictable tides of U.S. politics and protectionism. This isn't merely a short-term response to the latest round of tariffs. It represents a fundamental rethinking of Mexico's economic identity. At the core of this shift is a commitment to diversifying trade partnerships, particularly with major players such as China, Japan, and the European Union. Ongoing negotiations with these global economic powers point to a broader ambition: to weave Mexico more tightly into global trade networks, ensuring it is no longer overly tethered to a single economic partner. This strategy serves both as a protective buffer against immediate shocks and as a springboard for seizing new commercial and geopolitical opportunities in an increasingly multipolar world. One of the crown jewels of this diversification strategy lies in the fast-emerging electric vehicle (EV) battery sector. As the global push toward clean energy accelerates, demand for critical minerals, especially lithium, is skyrocketing. Often referred to as the white gold of the energy transition, lithium has become a cornerstone of the new industrial economy. With untapped reserves beneath its soil, Mexico has drawn the attention of international mining companies, eager to gain a foothold in this strategically vital resource market. But for the Sheinbaum administration, lithium is more than just a mineral. It's a symbol of national transformation. By nurturing domestic industries around lithium extraction and battery production. Mexico is positioning itself not just as a passive supplier of raw materials, but as an active, value-adding participant in one of the world's most advanced sectors. This marks a conscious departure from its historical role as a low-cost labor destination. Instead, the goal is to climb the value chain, to evolve into a serious contender in the global green economy, and thereby gain a stronger bargaining position in future trade negotiations. This assertive vision for the future is resonating across Mexico. A surge in nationalist sentiment, partly rooted in frustration with years of perceived subservience to U.S. demands on trade and migration, has galvanized popular support for Sheinbaum's more defiant posture. Recent public opinion surveys show that over 60% of Mexicans back the president's tough stance toward Washington, viewing it as a much-needed stand for sovereignty, self-respect, and long-term economic independence. Escalating tensions and the prospect of negotiation. North America's trade landscape has entered a new and volatile phase, with Canada officially joining Mexico in pushing back against U.S. protectionism. On April 2nd, Ottawa announced its own package of retaliatory tariffs, a calculated move that sends a powerful signal. The United States is no longer facing isolated discontent, but a coordinated regional backlash from both its northern and southern neighbors. Despite public reassurances from some White House officials, who argue that Canada and Mexico remain too economically tied to the U.S. to risk a prolonged confrontation, the fundamentals suggest otherwise. The current dynamics reflect a shift in leverage. Years of deep trade integration have indeed created interdependence, but they've also given America's neighbors significant counter-pressure tools. Canada's response is anything but symbolic. Its tariffs are laser-focused and politically sophisticated. Ottawa is targeting specific U.S. sectors, including agricultural exports like corn and dairy, industrial machinery, and strategic metals, with an eye toward key voting blocs in swing states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. These are the very regions that could influence the outcome of the 2024 U.S. presidential election. In short, Canada is applying economic pressure where it will likely have the most political impact. Concurrently, Canadian leaders have launched support programs aimed at insulating domestic industries from the fallout of American tariffs. This dual-track strategy, retaliation abroad, cushioning at home, reinforces Ottawa's position as principled yet pragmatic. It's not simply fighting tariffs. It's defending the idea that economic sovereignty cannot be held hostage by a trading partner, no matter how powerful. While Canada targets political vulnerability, Mexico is waging a broader structural campaign. A two-front strategy combining short-term retaliation with long-term diversification. Tariff measures announced by the Sheinbaum administration zero in on key U.S. exports like processed foods, petrochemicals, and automotive components. Sectors where Mexican importers have significant flexibility to shift suppliers or substitute domestic production. But Mexico's vision goes beyond tit-for-tat measures. Behind the scenes, its diplomats are accelerating negotiations with economic blocs, such as the European Union, and the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP. By doing so, Mexico is hedging against future shocks and actively cultivating alternative economic lifelines, a strategy that positions it as a regional power increasingly less beholden to U.S. economic dominance. This assertive posture also includes bolstering regional coordination, amid speculation in Washington that the U.S. might attempt to exploit differences between Canada and Mexico, offering selective trade exemptions or policy flexibility to divide the two. The opposite seems to be unfolding. High-level talks between Mexico City and Ottawa have grown more frequent and more aligned. Public statements from both governments stress the importance of regional solidarity in resisting unilateralism and defending rules-based trade norms. Their coordinated message is clear. North America's smaller economies are no longer willing to be played against each other by a more powerful partner. Instead, they are redefining their relationship with Washington, not through confrontation alone, but through unity, resilience, and strategic repositioning. As the tariff standoff escalates, its impacts are beginning to reverberate through some of the most technologically advanced and globally interconnected industries, especially electric vehicles, EEVs, and semiconductors. These sectors depend heavily on seamless cross-border movement of components, labor, and capital. And for many international firms, particularly those from Europe and Asia, Mexico has long served as a manufacturing base, offering proximity to the U.S. market without the high costs of operating inside the U.S. itself. That model is now under threat. The introduction of steep U.S. tariffs, combined with growing policy uncertainty, is prompting many foreign companies to reassess their operations. Executives are now asking hard questions. Will Mexico remain a reliable gateway to the U.S. market? Or will new American barriers force costly realignments of supply chains, production hubs, and distribution networks? Early signs point toward disruption. EV plants in northern Mexico are already reporting delays in cross-border shipments due to new customs inspections and tariff recalculations. Semiconductor suppliers warn that increased costs could cause project postponements, jeopardizing innovation timelines and introducing cascading delays downstream, especially in industries like telecommunications, medical devices, and renewable energy. What began as a narrowly defined U.S. effort to shield domestic industry has rapidly snowballed into a full-scale regional trade confrontation. But rather than back down, Canada and Mexico are proving unexpectedly agile. Using targeted economic countermeasures, institutional alliances, and long-term repositioning to push back. Their unified stance is challenging long-held assumptions about American economic supremacy in North America. This moment may mark a turning point, not necessarily a collapse of U.S. influence, but certainly a recalibration. Canada and Mexico are no longer passive stakeholders in the North American trade framework. They are emerging as assertive actors, capable of defending their interests, redefining their roles, and demanding a more balanced future for continental trade relations. The regional future and Mexico's assertive message. President Claudia Sheinbaum's declaration, "We are not the enemy of anyone, but we will bow to no one. When we are unilaterally imposed upon, we must respond," has emerged not only as a policy stance, but as a defining moment in Mexico's modern political identity. Within hours, the statement had saturated national news cycles and social media feeds, hailed by many as the articulation of a long-awaited shift, a move away from economic subordination towards strategic autonomy. For a country historically shaped by its proximity to the United States, this message resonates as both a warning and a promise that Mexico is ready to chart its own course in a world no longer defined by U.S. hegemony. This sentiment is more than just symbolic. It reflects a deep and growing national desire to redefine the terms of Mexico's engagement with its northern neighbor. Decades of lopsided negotiations, whether on trade, migration, or border security, have bred frustration and fatigue. Now, with the United States doubling down on protectionist policies, President Sheinbaum's government is seizing the moment to push back, offering not confrontation for its own sake, but a recalibration rooted in sovereignty, resilience, and national dignity. For many international observers, Mexico's response marks a potential inflection point in the post-NAFTA regional order. No longer willing to serve merely as the low-wage manufacturing extension of U.S. supply chains, Mexico is seeking a role as a co-equal partner in regional and global trade. This means not just resisting tariffs, but reimagining trade architecture, pivoting to Asian and European markets, asserting control over strategic resources like lithium, and developing domestic high-value industries such as electric vehicle battery production. Of course, the risks of such a pivot are considerable. The Mexican and American economies remain tightly interlinked, with hundreds of billions of dollars in trade crossing the border annually. A breakdown in this relationship could generate profound short-term shocks. Production delays, investment slowdowns, and consumer price hikes on both sides. Yet within the Sheinbaum administration, there is a clear willingness to accept short-term volatility in exchange for long-term strategic independence. Polls suggest that a majority of Mexicans support this tougher posture. Years of perceived humiliation, from border wall rhetoric to trade bullying, have shifted public opinion decisively. In this context, Sheinbaum's firm tone is not only politically advantageous, it is seen by many as morally necessary. As April 3rd approaches, with Mexico set to unveil its final tariff retaliation package, all eyes are on Washington. Will the U.S. seek de-escalation or double down on its isolationist turn? Regardless of the immediate outcome, the message from Mexico is clear. The days of automatic compliance are over. A new chapter in North American trade, more contested, more pluralistic, and potentially more balanced, is beginning to unfold.